Beyond the 7 seas, beyond the 7 mountains, and beyond the 7 forests, there lived a woodcutter. And he was so poor, for it was a time of famine, that all he brought home was a handful of beans. He had a son called Jaś and a daughter called Małgosia. But their mother had died, and he had married again. And his new wife was cruel and selfish and mean. Well, she took all the beans and ate them herself. And Jaś and Małgosia had nothing to eat, and they were so hungry as they lay in their bed. They could not sleep, and they heard their father's voice. "Oh, wife, we must not leave the children in the forest, must we?"
No.
Well, Jaś and Małgosia were afraid. "Do not cry, sister." And Jaś crept silently down the stairs and came out of the back door, which was unlocked, and the kind moon was shining, and he picked up a handful of shining white pebbles. And he put those pebbles into his pockets, and he closed the door and crept back up the stairs and went to bed. And in the morning the children were woken by their stepmother. "Wake up, wicked! Wake up, good! Little mouse must fetch some wood." "Wake up, wicked! Wake up, good! Little mouse must fetch some wood." And the children followed their stepmother and their father, who carried his axe, and they followed them through the trees and deep, deep into the forest. And there, deep in the forest, they stopped. All the way along, Jaś had been dropping shining white pebbles from his pocket so that they would find their way back. Their father made a fire and a bed of dry leaves. And the 2 children lay in the bed of dry leaves, and he bent over them and he kissed them. And then they could hear the sound of what they thought must be their father chopping wood with his axe. But their stepmother, she leant over them and she said, "Lay down by the fire and rest, little mouse inside the nest. Lay down by the fire and rest, little mouse inside the nest." And there they were left all day, hearing the bashing, thinking their father was chopping wood. And they kept warm until the evening, when the fire began to die down. And they came to look, and there was a breadboard with a rolling pin, where their stepmother had tied them to a tree, dashing together in the wind. They were abandoned. "Do not worry, sister. Do not cry. I have left a trail of pebbles." And together they looked, and the kind moon shone down as the evening fell. And there, sparkling on the ground, were the white pebbles that he had dropped along the way. And they went back, following that trail through the trees. And finally, they came to the edge of the forest and to their home. And when the door opened, there was their father, who gave a great cry of joy. "Oh, my children are safe." Their stepmother said, "You stayed late inside the wood. Little mouse, you're no good. You stayed late inside the wood. Little mouse, you're no good." Well, the children lay hungrier than ever in their beds, for they had had nothing to eat. And again they heard their father's voice. "Oh, my wife, do not make me do this again." Again the children cried, and again Jaś said, "Do not worry, sister." And he climbed down the stairs and pushed the back door, but could he open it? The door was locked. But then he went into the pantry. The pantry was empty. There was no food, except he picked up a handful of breadcrumbs from the floor, and he put them in his pocket. And he crept back up the stairs. And they went to sleep. And in the morning they were woken by their stepmother, who said, "Wake up, wicked, wake up, good. Little mouse must fetch some wood." And the children, they climbed out of bed and they followed their father and their stepmother through the trees and deep into the dark forest. And all the way, Jaś was dropping breadcrumbs from his pocket so that they might find their way home. And when they got to that place deep in the dark heart of the forest, their father made a fire, and next to the fire a pile of dead leaves where the children might rest. And the tears ran down his cheeks as he bid them goodbye. And their stepmother, she bent down and she leant over them, and they could smell her breath, and she said, "Lay down by the fire and rest. Little mouse inside the nest." The children could hear. But was it the sound of their father chopping wood? All day long they lay there by the fire until the fire in the evening started to die down. And they came to that place where they were cold, and they found the breadboard and the rolling pin bashing together in the wind. They were abandoned once more. "Do not worry, my sister. I left a trail of breadcrumbs. See? And the kind moon shone down. But where were the breadcrumbs? Could they find them?" Why could they not find the breadcrumbs? Because all of the birds of the forest had flown down and pecked them up. The children went round and round in circles. Could they find their way out of the forest? No. Finally, they saw ahead of them a glimmer of light, and there was a strange little house. It was all round. And when they came to that house, it smelt very good. Jaś came up to the house and sniffed at the wall. He broke off a piece and tasted it. It tasted of cake. He broke off bigger pieces and gave some to his sister, Małgosia. And soon they were eating, and it was so long since they had eaten, it was the best taste in all the world. But from inside the house they heard a voice. "Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who is eating off my house? Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who is eating of my house?" And the children answered, the wind, only the wind." And they continued to eat, and now they found that there were frosted panes of iced sugar instead of windows. And they licked at the windows, and they broke pieces off, and Małgosia loved those crunchy bits of sugar. But from inside the house, there came that voice again. "Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who is eating of my house?" And the children answered, the wind, only the wind." And they continued to eat. And now Jaś reached up to that roof, and he climbed up, and he broke off a piece from the roof and tasted it. Oh, it was like gingerbread. It was so good. And he pulled Małgosia up behind, and the two children ate pieces of the roof. And from inside the house there came that cry, "Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who is eating of my house?" And they answered, the wind. "Little mouse!" And there, sticking her head through the roof of that house, was the most terrible woman, a witch, the Baba Yaga herself. And her nose was long and hooked, and her eyes were red and roomy, and she reached with her long yellowing fingernails towards the children. But they jumped down, scrambling down from the roof of the house, and the two children began to run as fast as they could, as fast as the wind. But behind them there came the Baba Yaga, and she was riding in a great cauldron with a broom sweeping her way through the trees of the forest. And she reached out with her fingernails and caught Jaś and Małgosia and put them in the cauldron, and flew back and inside the house. And there they were inside that round house, and in every corner there were piles of shining bright pearls. and she locked Jaś inside a cage. And she put the key inside her pocket. Feed him! Well, Małgosia went and she found food in the house. She found chicken and bread and milk. And she passed them through the bars of the cage so that Jaś could eat. Now, the Baba Yaga came back. Stick out your finger, little rat. Are you thin or are you fat? Well, Małgosia wondered what her brother would do, but Jaś was quick as a flash. He took a chicken bone and he poked it through the bars of the cage, and the Baba Yaga could not see well, for her eyes were red. And she squeezed the chicken bone with her fingernails. Ah! Feed him more! And she went away. And Małgosia fetched more chicken and more bread and more milk and passed them through the bars of the cage. And she had some too. Oh, they were so hungry, but that food was so good. And soon they were no longer skin and bones, but the children were starting to get a little bit of flesh on them. And the Baba Yaga came back and she said, stick out your finger, little rat. Are you thin or are you fat? And quick as a flash, Jaś put out a chicken bone. Feed him more. Well, Małgosia brought more chicken and more bread and more milk for her brother and put them through the bars of the cage, and he ate, and now the children were getting quite plump. Małgosia as well. And the Baba Yaga returned, and you know what she said. Stick out your finger, little rat. Are you thin or are you fat? And he put out the chicken bone. And she squeezed. And she said, whether he is fat or thin, now I will devour him. And she seized Małgosia by her arm and led her over to the oven. And she said, light the oven and make sure it is hot. She opened the oven door. Now, she had felt how firm and fleshy Małgosia's arm was, and the Baba Yaga had a plan. But Małgosia was quick. She said, Baba Yaga, I do not know how to light the oven. Will you not show me? And the Baba Yaga said, foolish girl. And she leant inside the oven, and she lit the oven so the oven was bright red hot. And as she leant inside the oven, as quick as a flash, Małgosia pushed her hand deep inside the Baba Yaga's pocket and pulled out the key. And with a great shove, she pushed Baba Yaga inside the oven and slammed the door closed. And Małgosia, she ran to the cage and she unlocked the key in the lock of the door, and the door burst open, and she pulled Małgosia. Jaś and Małgosia were out of that cage, and they were looking around that round house, and in every corner there were shining bright pearls, and they filled their pockets with pearls, and Małgosia filled her apron with pearls, and the Baba Yaga all along was moaning from inside the oven where she was being cooked. Ah! And now the children climbed out through the roof of the house, and they dropped down, scrambling to the ground, and they stood, and they ran as fast as the wind could carry them. But as they looked around, the house had risen up on two great chicken legs, and the house was running after them, faster than they were. Quicker and quicker, quick, Małgosia, run, 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 Jaś, quicker! And the house began to spin round and faster and redder and hotter, and all the time the Baba Yaga was crying out and shrieking in pain, and suddenly that great house burst into a ball of flames and was gone. The children looked around, and the silvery moon shone a path between the trees. And the kind moon led them out between the trees to the edge of the forest, and there was their little house. And panting and exhausted, they knocked on the door, and the door flew open, and there was their father. "Oh, my children, I thought I had lost you forever." And he took the children in his arms, and they said, "Where is our stepmother? Oh, she is gone, and she will never return." And then they emptied their pockets and their aprons, and their floor was covered in shining pearls. And their father gave a great shout of joy, for he knew that they would never, ever be hungry again.